Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ajahn Sona, and welcome to our chanting tutorial. Let's see, we have 18 or 20 people in here. Have about an hour that we've allotted this afternoon to go over the Pali-English chanting that we do in our monasteries. It's a feature of our daily practice in our monasteries in Thailand and also around the world. In Thailand, bilingual chanting was something of a modern movement, started and popularized by one of my very first teachers, Ajahn Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. And Ajahn Chah had this in his monastery. A big part of Ajahn Chah's mission, if you might say, was the emphasis he gave on not just monastic practice, but lay practice. And gathering at the monastery and practicing morning and evening chanting, gathering on the Buddhist Sabbaths, known as the Uposatha days, was something that he gave kind of great emphasis to. So we'll spend an hour here going over the mechanics of chanting and looking at the chanting book and how we practice this in our monasteries. So this will be primarily geared towards and of use to people that are interested in the basics. So it's primarily for people that are new to it. And our inspiration was, of course, to respond to some requests from people that weren't very familiar with this and who are planning on attending the upcoming retreat we have May 1st to 10th with Ajahn Sona of Birken Monastery. So if you haven't already done so, please get a copy of Volume 1 of our chanting book. So it is this kind of brown colored book here. And I've linked it in the description of this live stream. So there's two links in the live stream. One is to our normal chanting book, a PDF of our normal chanting book from the Abhayagiri website, our parent monastery. And also there's underneath that, if you're planning on doing the retreat, you might as well download the secondary PDF, which is one that I went through and I removed some of the stuff that won't be necessary for the retreat and put a little highlighting in the introduction, the table of contents. So it'd be easy to identify and focus, not just maybe today, but also like in the retreat. Early morning might not be so bright and we're meditating and then going to chanting. So tried to just create something special that would highlight which chants will be used so you can safely ignore the rest. But let's see. Okay, well, we have 25 people and it's 3 after the hour, so we'll get started here. We're going to focus on pronunciation, and I'll take questions later, but so maybe I'll turn off the Skype thing here, but okay. I'll be taking questions later towards the end because otherwise I think it might be difficult for me to get through some of the basics of pronunciation and then walking people through a little bit of the structure of how it is that we do our chanting. So if you haven't done so already, get your chanting book or download your PDF, and we'll be taking a look at that. And the first area we're going to go to is the area towards the end of the book on pronunciation. So while you're getting your book, give me a brief minute here and I'll set up the chanting book for us. So let's see. Okay, so I have the chanting book up for us here. This is, you want to make sure you have volume 1. We're not going to be spending any time on volume 2, which is some of the longer chants that we have, including the blessing chants, which we've been doing every evening on the live stream right now. When we get to the retreat, we'll stop doing the blessing chants in the evening, and it'd just be primarily morning and evening sections of the chanting plus some reflections. So this is what we're going to be focusing on here, and during the retreat. And if you've grabbed a copy of the PDF that I linked below for the retreat, these will be the only chants that you'll need. Also, there is, I believe, I've highlighted this section in the end here for beginning the retreat if people want to take the 3 refuges and precepts. I want to go to the very end of the chanting book and walk people through the appendix, which details the pronunciation, the Pali phonetics and pronunciation. This is probably one of the biggest obstacles for people really enjoying the Pali chanting is just familiarizing themselves with some of the features of the Pali language. Almost all the sounds that you find in the Pali language are found in modern spoken English. So there are not really any strange sounds. The ones that aren't are very close to things that we use. So, there's none of these should be very difficult to pronounce. However, there's a precision in the Pali language that doesn't exist in English. So sometimes P's or H's or PH's or sound like an F, in the English language, for example. And English is very imprecise in the way it spells. Pali is very precise. So spending some time going over this appendix in the end and familiarizing yourself with the sounds of the Pali language can be very useful. It is a little bit of a skill to train oneself to produce those sounds when you're chanting, as opposed to what you would produce if you were reading it in English. And you have this, if you're a native English speaker and you've grown up with the English language, it's your primary language, there's this inertia and this tendency when you see something written in a Roman letter to use an almost unconscious sensibility that we have of how something would be pronounced in that sort of word, in the way it's written. And this is especially true of the vowels. Vowels are open sounds, and they're very slippery in a sense. They're, you're just oftentimes moving the position of the tongue a little bit to produce a different vowel, or changing the length of how long it is that you hold or create that sound. So this today is really just going to be an introduction and a primer, and I wouldn't stress all the details. I'd just be walking people through this to help encourage them, familiarize themselves with it. You'll have some questions, and then I would encourage you to sort of read through this, and then as you begin to sort of chant Pali, and you can practice with our morning and evening sessions, listen and practice chanting, and then repeat. Come back to this from time to time to read through it again, and then that will help sort of tune the listening, and then also tune your ability to sort of chant Pali correctly. So anyways, relax, have a good time with it. This should be kind of easy and fun. And I think one of the values of spending a little bit of time on this is so you can get comfortable and familiar with it, and then the mechanics can start to fade in the background in a short period of time, and you can enjoy the more devotional, reflective, and even social dimension of doing Pali and English chanting. So, so let's dive into this. And first, we're going to focus on vowels. And let me see if I can make a change to my screen so it will be easier for people to read on screen in the video, or for people that might not have a the book in front of them. So we're going to start with the vowels. And the main thing to emphasize here about the vowels is there's a precision about the length of the vowel. In English writing system, we're not precise about it. We rely more on habits determining sort of how long or short a vowel is. So in the book here, there's some good examples to help you tune in on the sound, like because an A in English represents a whole variety of sounds. But in Pali, there is a short A, which is denoted here sort of with just a simple A, and then it has what we call a diacritical mark over here for the long. So this bar over the top of the A indicates that it is long, and it's approximately twice as long as the short A. So the short A is very short, and then the long is ah. So ah. So listen for the difference there. Ah. And then I, similar, without a diacritical, it is short, as in hit. So e, e. So as in hit and machine. So hit is maybe not the best example, actually. E. And then you, ooh. So it's almost a little more like a O sound. Ooh. And then the Romanized character E in Pali is A, as in gray. And the O character is O, like more. O, like buto. So E and O are always long, and approximately twice as long as the short vowels. So those are the basic vowels. Just from the perspective of linguistics or phonetics, vowels are open and unobstructed sounds that we produce. And again, they largely are determined by where the tongue is placed in the mouth. And through listening and imitating and repetition, you can hone in on these sounds over time. If you're really geeky, you can actually go to Wikipedia and look up where they're actually pronounced in the mouth, how the tongue should be shaped, how high, how low. There are resources for that sort of thing, but I think for most people, they just use this as a guide and then listen and repeat and try to hone in on creating those sounds. So the next sounds we're going to look at are the consonants. And as opposed to an open sound, which is the vowels are open sounds, a consonant is a stopping or a restriction of air. So, and we can do that in the throat. We can do that sort of by placing the tongue against the palate of the the mouth. We can do that by placing the tongue against the back of the teeth. We can do that by closing our lips. But a consonant is a stopping of the air. And I share that with you because in English, it can be a little, in spoken English, it can be a little sort of sloppy how we pronounce these, but in Pali, there's a kind of precision. And part of what makes the chanting of Pali, I think, quite beautiful is this kind of rhythmic nature of open and closed sounds. And one of the features that really accentuates or brings that out is how the syllables and especially double consonants come together, which we'll get to in a little bit later. So just by highlighting that might heighten your awareness so that when you're listening, you kind of notice that. Like Karaniyamata Kusalena Yang Tang San Tang Patang. And even if we chant in a very monotone way, there's this rhythmic sort of nature of the Pali that comes out. And also focusing a little bit on the nature of the difference between open and closed syllables will help with one of the challenges that we encounter was Pali words can be very long. In many ancient languages, they didn't use spaces whatsoever. And we've broken some of the Pali words up in our chanting book with spaces to make it more readable, but still the average length of some of the Pali compounds and Pali words is abnormally long for somebody who's a speaker of English or any modern language. And when you first encounter it, you might try to sort of race through it, and it's just too much. You can't sort of comprehend by sight a word that's 20 characters long or 13 characters long on a first read. But if you're able to sort of break it down and you look for these stops where we have open and closed syllables and double consonants, over time you'll train yourself to roll through the Pali words on sight and pronounce them correctly. So looking at our consonants here, you see there's a few different ways that these are defined. The C is really, I think of it more as like a J sound. Like ancient is the example is giving here. Ancient, ancient, ancient. And you might not have ever thought of this, but a J and a C are actually linguistically very close together. So ancient, ancient. And I didn't take any time to find English words that can prove this, but ancient is a good one. The M dot and the N dot. This is a nasal, and a nasal is something we allow a little bit of the air to go up into the nasal cavity and create a resonance. So like sangha, sangha. And you can actually feel it resonate when you place the tongue to create an M. M is made at the lips, and then an N dot can be made in many places in the mouth. And typically the correct way to pronounce it is kind of dictated by by what surrounds it, so that the tongue doesn't have to be moving too far. So like if you're creating a stop in the back of the mouth, like a hard a G or a K, then the might be created by the back of the tongue pressing up against the mouth, and the air comes out the nose to create this vibratory sound. So, and this is as in sangha. So I wouldn't worry too much about the distinction between the M dot and the N. That's a very technical sort of thing. Just focus on creating this sound, the NG sound. The N with the tilde on it is what I like to think, similar to Spanish ña. So that's very close to a Y, but it's nasalized. Ña, ña. So here the example we have is canyon, 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 canyon. And you say that over several times, giving attention to sort of how that sound sits in the middle of the word there, but really focus in on the sound canyon, canyon, canyon. One of the co-abbats of Abhayagiri Monastery is Ajahn Yanako, and his name starts with that sound, Yanako. And if you just hear his name, like an average English person, if they just hear his name and they don't see it written, they might think it starts with a Y because of the way English language works. But it starts with this very sound, this nya sound, Yanako, Yanako. And then the V is not exactly like an English V, and as it notes here, it's somewhere between a V and a W. So moving on, we move to aspirated consonants here. So again, this is something that can be very sloppy in the English language, but it's very precise in Pali. So we have what I like to call a hard B and an aspirated B. So, and similar for the C, there's a C that's like a hard ch and then ch. And it's just the difference between a stop and a stop with a little puff of air. So Buddha, Buddha. It's not Buddha, it's Buddha. There's a little huh, there's a little bit of air. And you might practice this by finding sort of these double consonants in the chanting. Like Buddha is a good one because we have a double consonant there. So the first syllable is B-U-D. So bud. So the B is not aspirated in the first syllable. And the D is a hard D. And then it creates a stop. So we say bud. And then we end it with da. Buddha. Buddha. And I think Buddhism is so well known now in our country that even I have a hard time pronouncing Buddha properly. I say Buddha, which is how an American would say it. But if you want to say it the Pali way, it's Buddha, 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 Buddha. So can you hear that little puff on the DH at the end of Buddha? So these are the aspirated consonants. And maybe that's actually a little bit too fine for today, but I'm just going to get through all of these as an introduction, and then people can focus on these and integrate these over time as you learn the chanting and want to sort of improve your pronunciation. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to move to is retroflex consonants, and all I'm going to say about that is, for now, ignore that. So there's actually some debate about exactly how they should be pronounced. And I think you won't be missing anything for quite a while if you just ignore that for the time being. And we'll move on to chanting technique. So here's where we get into that which makes the rhythm of the Pali chanting. So we have stressed and unstressed syllables. So the unstressed syllables are what I call open syllables, because if you notice they're ending in a vowel, there's no stop, there's no consonant to sort of end them. And that changes the length of time that they get pronounced. So if you look at the example we have here, the first syllable of Budo gets 1 unit of time. The second Do gets a second because it's aspirated, not because it's aspirated, D, but because it has a long O. So again, just to repeat, the first But, so we have a hard B, not an aspirated B. We have a short vowel, U, and then an unaspirated D. So that the time measure for that first one is 1. But, And then the second syllable, do, is 1 because the O is long. And then in the second, susudo, su is half because it's open, it's unstressed. And the u is short. So it's su, like in my name, Sudanto. Su. And then sut again is a sibilant, really. A sibilant, a short vowel, and the D consonant, the unaspirated D. And then we have do, which is similar to buto, the ending of do. So just going through this as an example, this is buto, susuto, karuna, mahanawo. Again, buto, susuto, karuna, mahanawo. So looking at karuna, we have 2 half measures there because we have the unstressed short vowels, and then we have the end dot and under dot and a long A. So that gets a full one. So that gives you the basic kind of indication of the rhythm and the timing. And then moving down, there's an explanation of how double syllables work. And yet again, this is very sloppy in the English language, but it's very precise in the Pali language. When you have 2 consonants that come together, they form a stop. So the example we have here is anicca. So short, long, short. Anicca, anicca, anicca. And part of the reason I stressed the stopping nature of a consonant before is to help you out with this timing here. So you need to train your ear and train your mind just sort of when you see these double consonants to use that as an opportunity to come to a full stop. You're stopping the air from coming out. Anicca. And if you slow down and practice that, anicca, 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 and notice the tongue and how air is temporarily held back, and then cha, the next syllable releases out. Pukala, 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 pukala. So, and then they have written here, they're always enunciated separately, like the DDs in udeso, or as in mad dog, or Gigi as in maggo, maggo. So, and there's lots of KKs, and there's a very common kind of feature is the first of a double syllable oftentimes is the unaspirated variant, and then the second will be the aspirated variant, such as in Buddho, which was in our earlier example there. So, okay, so lastly, well, not lastly, but next, moving on to pronunciation, there's a few features of the chanting book that are conventions that we've just come up in our tradition, stylistically, you might say. So the first one is square brackets, and we'll be walking through the morning and evening chanting a little bit here, so you'll see how that actually plays out in the practice of the chanting. But the square brackets are for the chant leader. So those are not voiced by anybody other than the chant leader, and it's a way to kind of reestablish pitch and tone, and also just to break up some of the monotony of the chanting. So when you see the square brackets, that's part that you normally won't do when you're in a group. But even if you're listening on the live stream during the retreat, it's a chance to kind of realign the timing and the tone. So stop for those and let the chant leader do it, and then as soon as the bracket ends, the next syllable is where you join in on. So the slash mark, you'll find that indicating an either or choice. So Pali has two genders, male and female, and our communities in England especially have both monks and nuns and laymen and laywomen, and it's traditional to chant sort of according to gender. So those slashes are indicating the masculine and feminine forms of the Pali language there. So, and then lastly, these cantillation marks. These cantillation marks are here on the screen. And I don't remember that word even, cantillation, but I just call them tonal marks. Seems like a simpler, more easily understandable way to refer to them. This, again, is a convention that we developed in our monasteries in England, because in the Thai language, they have tones. It is a tonal language similar to Chinese, and that gives it a certain kind of flavor, and it breaks up a little bit of what some might think as the monotony of the chanting. It possibly makes it easier for people to memorize as well. So in the early days, as the monasteries were being developed in England, several people worked on developing a three-tone high, normal, and low tone, and those are indicated by these little arrow, or I guess they're cantillation marks. So there's a high tone if it's above, there's a low tone if it's below, and then this, without being pointed out, might not be noticed by some, but there is a longer low and high sometimes to kind of give a little extra emphasis or a little extra length. And if it is a mid-tone and it's to be given a little extra time, then it's just underlined. So, and then lastly, there's just a note on hyphenation. That's really just to break up the long length of the words and maybe make it easier for people to chant. So that's a tour of the pronunciation. And again, just think of this as the first pass through it. If you're new to this, spend a little bit of time, pick up what you can, but over time, listen, chant, and come back and look at this again, and through experience, use your ear, use the active practice of chanting to eventually kind of hone in on trying to use the kind of correct timings and pronunciation of the language. So, all right. So let's return now to the structure of the chanting, especially as we're going to be using it on the upcoming retreat. So in the morning time, we will be doing this section over here, pages 1 through 16. And I'll walk through that in just a minute. I mentioned on the morning coffee kind of live stream, I guess it was yesterday, that a lot of the morning chanting that we do and the first part of the evening chanting is really built upon this kind of recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So, and in particular, the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And that's really the essence of it. And we chant that as a way to recollect those, but also to pay homage to the Buddha. So it's an activity that can be used to remember, recollect, arouse a sense of faith and devotion, but also really reflect in on the kind of qualities of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. So, it's a little hard for me sitting in the office to show you this, but the procedure we go through, we kind of gather in the hall in front of the shrine, and then typically the senior monk or a senior monk or nun will light candles and incense, and then the community, following the cue of either the chant leader or the senior monk or nun, will bow collectively 3 times to the shrine. So generally one would come into the meditation hall, bow to the shrine, kind of a personal bow, like a check-in. And then they wait until all the Sangha is gathered, and then collectively candles and incense are offered, and then people bow to the shrine together in unison. And then the chanting sort of begins. And I have a little video that I shot of Ajahn sake for people that may not have seen this before. So let's see if we can play this here. So for a male, he gets up on his toes like that. For women, their feet are flat. They raise the hands in Anjali up to the forehead and then bow down once, touching the forehead between the hands. Then we bow again, touching the forehead to the floor again between the hands. And in this shot, you can see from the front how his head comes down between the hands placed on the mat, bowing, and then conclude by raising the hands back up and like this, and then the chanting begins. So this is the way that the bowing happens in Thailand. There's variations in different countries, but this is the way that it's practiced in Thailand, especially in our monasteries. So okay, so let's take a look now at the morning chanting, and this will show you some of the features of the chanting book that we just discussed. And I can chant a few brief sort of things to give people some examples of how this goes. In the morning, we do bilingual chanting. Sometimes in the evening, we just do Pali chanting or English chanting. The evening chanting session can be done bilingual, but oftentimes we just do either the Pali or the English for the first section to leave some time for doing reflective chants. But the morning chanting is almost completely bilingual. So you see it starts off here with the brackets. So the chant leader says, yo so, and then everybody jumps in on the next syllable. Bhagava arahang samma sambuddho. To the Blessed One, the Lord who fully attained perfect enlightenment. Swakato yena bhagavata dhammo. To the teaching which he expounded so well. So, in this chant, the dedication of offerings, we do both at the very beginning of the morning and the evening chanting. So, let's see. And focusing at the end here, the very end of that dedication of offerings, we have something new going on here. Over on the right, you see it says bow. So these are cues to how the ceremony is practiced in our monasteries. So towards the end of that chant, you'll notice we're chanting along Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. And then everybody stops, and then the chant leader says, Swakato, and then everybody jumps back in. Bhagavata Dhammo. The teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammang namasami. I bow to the Dhamma. So this is an example of that long, low tone. See, this one is short, this one is long. I bow to the Dhamma. And then everybody stops and the chant leader says the bit in the brackets. Supatipanno. Everyone jumps in. Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho. the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sanghang namami, I bow to the Sangha. And then bow. So then we move on to the next chant, the preliminary homage. And there's some stylistic variation here in some of the monasteries. They will sometimes, the chant leader will skip doing both the Pali and the English. And sometimes they'll skip that altogether for reflective chants and really just start with the very first line of the chant itself. So my style is I will do the Pali here, and I usually do it fairly quick because I'm the only one chanting it. So I go, Hannamayang Buddhasa Bhagavato Pubabagan. I can't do it right now. Hannamayang Buddhasa Bhagavato Pubaba Namakarang Karomase. And then everyone's ready to jump in on Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. And then here's another ritual notation. We do this 3 times. So rather than writing out 3 times, they just put 3 times. So we do the Pali 3 times on this chant, and then we go to the English translation, and we do that 3 times as well. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Then we go on to the next chant. So the next 3 chants are homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dhamma, homage to the Sangha. And these are the recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And similar to with the preliminary homage, I usually just do the Pali, and then everyone will join in on the first line of the chant. So, Hannamayang Buddha, Hannamayang Buddha, Pituting Karomase. Then everyone jumps in, Yo so. And sometimes the chant leader will maybe exaggerate or lengthen the first syllable of the chanting so everyone can kind of hear the pitch, the timing, get together, and match the timing up. So, and sometimes this yo-so can be very long. Yo-so. So no more to comment on that, although just notice that for these homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, there's a bow at the very end of each one. And then the last chant we do in the morning is a slightly longer one. It starts off with a devotional section. It's this one on page 9 called Salutation to the Triple Gem. And then it moves into some reflections on birth, aging, and death, separation, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, different forms of dukkha. There's various themes of Dhamma embedded in here, and most notably a contemplation of the 5 khandhas being impermanent, which you see here, Rupang, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, and Vijnana are anicca. They are impermanent. They are anatta, and we go through the 5 khandhas again, and they are dukkha. How did I miss that? So the main feature to point out with this one in the end here is there is a monastic version for ending this chant, which is the one that we're doing on the live stream right now. And so that's noted here. The following is chanted by the monks and the nuns, because some of the language of that is talking about having gone forth from home to homelessness and becoming a monastic and a follower of the Buddha and the aspirations that carries along with it. Right after that, on page 15, is an alternate version for the lay people. And I would encourage people to do that one. And since during this upcoming retreat, people will be chanting at home alone. When we get to that last section, just flip to this page 15, and as the monks are chanting, just chant this through on your own as a way to finish that. And then the last part of the morning chanting here, the closing homage, is usually not done until the meditation is done. So generally we'll have the chanting at the very beginning of our meditation session, and then we'll sit meditation after the chanting is done. And then at the very end, sometimes there will be a reflective chant. Sometimes no reflective chant. We'll just go straight into this closing chant. And this is a ritual, just again, extolling and praising the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha with a bow in between each one. So the chant leader starts it off, Arahang. Everyone jumps in. Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one. Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. And then you bow. Come back up, chant leader. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him. Dhammang namasami, I bow to the Dhamma. Bow. Come back up. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho, the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well. Sanghang namami, I bow to the Sangha. Bow. And then it's traditional at the closing of our morning and evening chanting to then turn and pay respects to the senior monk. So for those of you who have seen our morning and evening live streams, you can see that the monks are doing that. They pay respects. We usually turn around the way we have it arranged now. We usually turn around and face the camera that's in the room, and then the monks are bowing to me. So, and people can do that as they're comfortable or not. So let's see, moving forward, just take a quick look at the evening chanting. And the thing I want to note here is just how the book is arranged. I think this PDF differs a little bit in the way the pages are displaying on the screen from what you'll actually see if you have a copy of the book. Let me see if I can look here. But the layout in the book is such that page 18 is on the left side of the book. And I don't know if people can see this, but I'll hold this up really quick. This is a spiral bound book. So page 18 is on my left here, and page 19 is on my right. And the Pali is on the left, the English is on the right. And in the PDF, that's not sort of working out so well. But what we typically do is we'll usually pick one night just Pali for these first chants here, or English. And I will announce that at the beginning, and I'll probably give a preference for English, since this is going to be broadcast on Ajahn Sona's channel, and I'm assuming there might be many people that are new to chanting and maybe not so familiar with Pali. But we'll see. It's a little bit at my discretion each night whether we'll be doing Pali or English, and there's a few things I take into consideration. But so yeah, the chanting goes through. It starts in very much the same way, but it's just usually done in Pali or English instead of the bilingual in the morning. And then there's a preliminary homage, which is our Namo Tassa 3 times. And usually that's just done in the Pali language in the evening. And then I oftentimes like to do these recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and it's very much the same as the morning, but again, single language. And then that leaves us some time to do some reflective chants. Sometimes I will include these longer supreme praise of the Buddha, supreme praise of the Dhamma, and supreme praise of the Sangha as well. But I like to usually set those aside so we can do more reflective chants. So let's move on to that now. The reflections and recollections start on page 32 of the chanting book. And these are laid out in a variety of ways. Some of them have the Pali on the left and the English on the right. Sometimes they even span a page, so sometimes you're not seeing the full chant on just the left portion of the page or just the right portion of the page, and you have to turn the page to get the second part of it. And I've selected just these first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's only 7 reflections I've collected here that we'll be doing during the retreat. In addition to, there's something from Birken Monastery's chanting book, which is a fairly short summary of the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness that Ajahn Sona came up with many years ago. So there's really only 7 or 8 reflections that we'll be doing during the retreat period, and we'll probably repeat each of them once, maybe twice. There's not really much more to say about the reflections. You're familiar now with the notations, so if you're planning on joining us for the retreat or starting to join us on the morning sort of chanting thing, you might look through some of these so you're a little familiar with them. Okay, let me look at my notes here. After the reflections are done in the evening chanting, then we sit again. And then often after our meditation, we will do maybe one more reflection, depending on the timing, and then we'll move to the closing. So the closing in the morning and the evening is the same. I'll see if I can get it on the screen here. But again, it's just in one language. So here it is on this page over here. So generally in the evening, we just do the closing in Pali only. So before I demonstrated the Pali-English version, here's the Pali version. And usually that's how we end the evening meditation, just with this Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Apivademi. Bow. Swakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami. Bow. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Bow. And then we come up. Senior monk turns around and receives the rest of the Sangha, paying respects to him. So, okay, well that's a tour of the chanting and the pronunciation, and it took far longer than I thought, but I will give over some more time just to see if there's any questions. If people have to leave and can't stick around for questions now, you're welcome to join me on the morning Coffee with Ajahn Sudanto stream, which is 8 o'clock every morning, and I'd be happy to take further questions there. So I do have Skype open if people want to try calling and asking a question using that. Otherwise, you can just type it into the box here, and I'll put it up on the screen so everyone can see. Please be concise. There's only so many pixels on the screen. So if you want to call on Skype, pacific.hermitage is our Skype handle there. I put it on the lower part of the screen. So let's see. Let's go to Paula first. Where did the chanting originate from? Well, India originally. The Buddha was born and raised in India, and the early Sangha was centered in India. Eventually, it spread from there. There's not precise dating when the Pali language kind of came to be. it literally means the language of the texts. So India is a very language-rich area of the world, and it was at the time of the Buddha. There's evidence that the Buddha himself probably spoke several languages, or it's imputed, or that he and his disciples, many of them spoke different languages or different dialects. Most of the languages are referred to as Magadhan languages. They are Indo-European or related to Sanskrit, as is the Pali. So those are the origins of it. And the Buddha's teachings were codified sort of and memorized in an oral tradition, and then later written down in this Pali language of the text, which is probably fairly close to the languages of the early Sangha. So those are the origins. The particular form of the modern chants that we do is put together by Thai monks in modern times, although the heart of it really comes out of the early suttas. So as I've said before, this recollection of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is something you find that comes up again and again in the Pali Suttas as a way of evoking the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, which we call the Triple Gem, or sometimes as an expression of faith. And you find it in the sutta stories. People are talking about the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and they recite these kind of qualities that it has. And that provides a framework, but the actual finished form that we're using these days is a modern creation from Thailand. And then it's been altered by the English Sangha, which started in the late 70s. So, and we have this chanting book we have is a standardized chanting book, though, that's used in all of the international monasteries of the Ajahn Chah tradition. So, let's see. Hi, Ajahn. Will there be a formal request for teachings via chant during the retreat? No, there won't. A formal request for no, because Ajahn Sona is recording his Dhamma talks. They live in a very remote area and have only a satellite connection, so he can't do his talks live with the internet connection they have. So he'll be pre-recording his talks by a little bit, and then they'll be posted in Premiere every evening after our evening chanting and meditation is done. So there won't be any invitation, I believe, unless they edit that into his Dhamma talk. But I would think probably not. So, Mariam. All right, good. Thank you. Yeah, and I'd like some feedback. This is the first time I've tried anything like this, and as you can see, just the screen switching and putting these things up and flipping back and forth is a challenge in and of itself. But I don't think I've ever taught a chanting seminar before either. So I've talked about it informally and answered questions people have had, but I don't believe I've taken anybody on a full tour of the chanting like that. So, hi, Ajahn. Just to go over the double consonants again, this is to indicate a pause, not necessarily a repetition of the consonant. No, there's both. Each consonant gets pronounced. So, and let's go back to Buddho. So, the first D in Buddho, Buddho, the first D is closing the first syllable. We say but. We don't say but, we say but. So the D is closing off the air, restricting the air, and stopping sound from coming out. But, and so that's the first D. And then do is the second. So the tongue's still in the same position. But, do. So the pause comes in holding the restriction of air and then releasing it. You end up pronouncing another D. So Buddho, Buddho. And in English, we sometimes have double consonants, and they really just get pronounced as a single consonant. But In Pali, they're always both pronounced, and it really comes through that pausing. So I guess the answer is you get 2 for 1 there. By doing the pause, you pronounce the both of the consonants. So, are there any recordings of commonly used chants we can listen to? Yes, there are. I believe Abhayagiri, our parent monastery, has MP3s available on their website, as do most of the other monasteries. As we have a setup going downstairs, I'm planning to put up just some audio files of our chanting fairly soon, so people can use that and practice with that. It's sometimes nicer if you have a big sangha, but oftentimes, because of the way the meditation hall is arranged and the acoustics of the meditation hall, most of the live recordings sometimes are a bit kind of echoey, muddy, a little hard to follow. So I was thinking, since we just have 3 monks here in a small hall, eventually we might put up an audio file for people to follow along. And if I can find the time before the retreat starts, maybe we'll get that up and I can post it on our website or link to it either on this video, because this is being recorded now and will be live on YouTube when the live stream stops, for people to come back and watch it, or for people who couldn't show up. So this has been so helpful and will really help in the future. Thank you. Great. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad it's helpful. That's good to know. I wasn't really initially drawn to the chanting, but it really grew on me. And some monks, even in solitude, do a certain amount of this devotional chanting every day. I tend not to. I tend to do other forms of chanting and memorization when I'm on my own. So for me, it's without that kind of social dimension of coming together with other monks, nuns, and lay people. I don't oftentimes find it as useful. But if I'm in solitude on a long retreat, there might be a period of time where I'll be doing this on my own. But generally, I like to recite suttas, some of the cardinal suttas, or the Parita chanting, which we're doing in the evening times, the blessing chants. And some of that is for reflective purposes. Some of that is, I find the Parita chanting a little more meditative. It's a very nice preliminary before going into meditation. Do 20 minutes of straight Pali blessing chants. So, all right. So, some other appreciation from Frank, from Natasha. Good to see you. From Cecilia. Cecilia, you need to update your icon. Maybe you can take one of your great Buddha paintings and put it on there, or a nice picture of yourself. And Heather, very good. Thank you, Heather. It would be great to see if you can put up some chants so I can get familiar and practice. Well, they are up. We've been streaming our morning and evening puja every day on our YouTube channel. So I usually am removing some of the older ones, one, because the recording and precision's getting a little bit better for us, but also it was really cluttering up the channel just to leave all of them on there. So, but there's one that I just took the chanting section of the morning and saved that in a chanting playlist, so people can look and listen at that one. I haven't yet done so for the evening chanting, but I probably will soon. So, but I usually leave at least one morning and evening chanting that we've done recently on the channel if people want to use that for now. And there are ways, I've been told, that one can turn that into an MP3. So, I found your Hermitage chanting a bit fast compared to... Yes, it is. I like fast chanting. So, especially in the morning time, I find it a bit invigorating to kind of go through the chants at a fairly fast clip. And some of it's just the speed with which my mind works. I find it easier to kind of focus and the mind doesn't wander too much if I chant at a certain speed. And if that's not your style, I apologize. I try to slow down sometimes, but my tendency is to kind of move a little bit fast. So I guess on YouTube you can slow me down. Maybe not live, but if you put it on replay, you can slow me down. So let's see, a few more. Thank you. The recordings of the retreats would be helpful. Well, yes, all the retreat events will be recorded. So even the live streams will be recorded. They'll all be broadcast on Ajahn Sona's YouTube channel, and then they will live on his channel for some time, maybe as long as YouTube lasts. So they will be recorded and they will be there. So, and I believe also all of Ajahn Sona's talks will be put up on his podcast feed. So if people just want the audio of those talks, visit birken.ca and find the URL for his podcast feed, and you can get them those ways. So, Paula, could you say something about bowing? Why is it done? What should one internalize when doing it? Why is it done? Well, it's an ancient custom, an ancient Indian sort of custom, a way of paying respects, a way of humbling oneself, a way of lifting up or venerating that which we look up to. It's not a personal thing, especially when done to a monk or a nun so much. Like the senior monk in our monasteries is really a representative of the Sangha. So if I'm gone, then the Sangha just bows to the next most senior monk as a way of practicing sort of honoring one's devotion to practicing as a monastic and the years one's devoted to that. But also it's just a way to venerate that which we hold dear. There's a very interesting story in the suttas where the Buddha, after his enlightenment, is reflecting, since he's the Buddha, he's the highest, the most supreme in not just the whole universe, but in all of cosmology. And he has this thought that there's nobody he can bow to. And he, I forget the exact wording of it, but he sort of says essentially like, what a loss. There's nobody I can sort of bow to because I am the foremost. And so he says, well, I can bow to the Dhamma. So he holds the Dhamma up as something that he can sort of bow to. And it's very interesting because I've never thought about paying respects or bowing in that same way, but it's like having heroes or something that we venerate and something that we honor. And not having anything that we honor or venerate or bow to or something is a loss of sorts. It's nice to have things that we recognize such value in and hold in high esteem. And the bow is a cultural form of how to pay respects to that. Some of the different Buddhist traditions have different ways that they bow, like full body prostration bowing is done in Chinese and Tibetan traditions, for instance. And then even the way they stand and bow in Theravadan countries differs a little bit. So, Ajahn Chah talked about bowing a lot as a way to slow oneself down, recollect the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, return to the present moment. It's a very physical gesture to stop, get down, kneel, and then he gave a lot of emphasis to doing it in a very precise, non-sloppy way. So that's part of why I showed that video. You can see Ajahn Sek in the video I showed as an example. It's something done with patience, with grace, with honor, with mindfulness. And if developed, it can be a wonderful practice. So, Ajahn Chah stressed every time you go in and out of your dwelling, you should put your things down, arrange yourself, slow down, take the time to sort of bow to your shrine. And then whenever you're ready to leave your hut or your dwelling to go off and do some chores or to gather with the rest of the Sangha, you do the same. And when you come into the presence of your teacher, you bow. When you come into the meditation hall or any room that has a shrine set up, it was a practice to stop, bow 3 times, recollect, offer honor. And it's really a great way to just slow down, embody mindfulness. It breaks that momentum of just moving through the day from point A to point B to get this done and get that done. It's like creates a wonderful little mindfulness stop or mindfulness practice. So, a few more comments, and then maybe we'll wrap up here. So let's see. It's been particularly great to hear the evening chanting on YouTube, as I'm less familiar with those chants versus the morning. Yeah, well, what we're doing in the evening right now is the blessing chants. So many people wouldn't have heard those so much, but as we come up to the retreat period, we'll be shifting and doing the evening chanting that we went over in the chanting book today. So, sorry if this has already been asked. Do you have a suggested full day schedule for those of us who will want to fill the time between the YouTube broadcasts? Yes, and that is posted on our website, pacifichermitage.org, as well as on birken.ca, the Birken Forest Monastery website. So please head over there. Birken's a little easier to spell, BIRKEN.ca. So if you head over there, you can, I think they have a very prominent banner at the top that takes you to the retreat page. But it's also right now, I think, at the top of our homepage, pacifichermitage.org. So if people in here haven't registered for the retreat, we do have an optional registration form that just tells people a little bit, tells us a little bit about what people's intentions are in the retreat. And it's a way for myself and Ajahn Sona to learn a little bit about your background, level of experience and whatnot, and that might help inform how we deal with the questions and answers and even some of the content of Ajahn's Dhamma talks. So I think I prepared a URL here, and I believe that takes you to the registration form. If you're planning on doing our retreat May 1st to 10th, please head over to this tiny URL, Y7YUTAGX. So if you can just write the last bit and remember it's a tiny URL, that should get you there. Let's see. Ajahn, I notice your evening chanting during the opening homage, you go very slowly and seem to break it up. Is there a reason for this? It's stylistic, I guess. It's just the way it's done in our monasteries. So it adds a little variety to it or something. During like our evening chanting we're doing right now are blessing chants, and that can be very monotonous. Like if you listen to it, the tone is in a fairly narrow sort of range, and it's fairly quick. And so sometimes it's punctuated a little bit by stopping one chant, starting another, and then other times just the leader sort of says one bit and puts a little stop or break in there. So, and yes, I didn't see anything, for example, between 5:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. I believe there is. Let me see if I can look at that. Let's see. It's possible I can put it on the screen here. Yeah, it's probably a little bit too small for you all, but there is morning chanting from 5:30 to 6:40 a.m., chanting and meditation, and yeah, there isn't anything in the morning time there. The suggestion for people that want to do a full retreat is to just like schedule time in there. And if you visit Ajahn Sona's website, birken.ca, or the post that I just showed you from our website, there's a video in there where Ajahn gives some encouragement of how to structure the day. But recognizing that many people, most everyone will be doing this from home, and that there will be maybe many people whose life circumstances doesn't allow them to follow a strict schedule. There's some big time periods there where people will just need to structure practice according to their living situation and also their abilities. What we would typically do if we were doing this retreat in person at Birken is there'd be a block in the morning from, say, 8 to 11, where people could do walking and sitting meditation, and there'd be another block in the afternoon. But I think the reasoning behind what we have here is just expecting people with their home lives and other responsibilities wouldn't be able to adhere to something like that. So, but that's a suggestion for you. Like if you have the ability to sort of create a focused time period in the morning to be doing 2 or 3 hours of formal meditation, that would be my suggestion. So, all right, well, let's wrap up. So you're welcome, Matthew. Thanks for joining us, and also Mike. And that'd be it for today. Thank everyone for joining me. And YouTube takes a little while to process these things, but there's usually a raw copy right away. And then after a little bit, it's there for people to come back to. If you have friends that missed this and are interested in the chanting or are planning on coming to the retreat, please go ahead and share the link, and they can view this later, and hopefully that'll help out. And I thank you all for joining us and hope that was helpful. And again, I'll be doing my morning coffee live streams at 8 a.m. every morning. So if people have questions and want to bring questions about the chanting that come up to you later, you didn't have a chance to ask now, please visit me tomorrow morning on the YouTube channel at 8 o'clock. And until then, I'll see you later, unless you're joining us for the evening meditation, which starts at 6 o'clock. So, bye-bye.